On a freezing night, 2 infants were found in a dumpster. But what happened to them next shocked everyone. The winter evening took the city by surprise. The wind drove the snow through the empty streets, mixing it with the glow of streetlights. A woman, wrapped in an old gray coat, walked slowly along the road. Her legs, as if weighed down, barely moved across the icy ground, and a hood concealed her face. Only her eyes, full of sorrow, betrayed her despair. Every step she took was heavy with pain, as though she was battling not only the cold but also her inner demons. In her arms, she held 2 small bundles, each trembling from the cold. The newborns, who had barely seen the light of day, were wrapped in blankets that could no longer protect them from the frosty wind. She stopped by an old dumpster and stared at it for a long time, as if hoping for something. Then, slowly, she bent down and placed the children on the cold metal. Her fingers clung to the fabric as if refusing to let go, struggling with a final glimmer of hesitation. The wind howled its eerie melody, blending with the sound of her own breath. The woman whispered hoarsely, "Forgive me." Her voice trembled like lonely leaves in the wind. She took a step back, then another, and finally dissolved into the darkness, becoming part of the cold night. A few minutes later, the crunch of footsteps echoed in the distance. A man in a long coat was returning home after a long workday. The wind lashed at his face, urging him to move faster, to reach the warmth of his home. But then, a faint, barely audible cry pierced the air, making him freeze in place. Did I imagine it? The thought flickered through his mind. He narrowed his eyes, peering into the blizzard. The sound came again, a cry, quiet and almost pleading, like the voice of a soul trapped in the icy air. He turned toward the dark shape of the dumpster. His first instinct was to ignore it. Not my problem, he thought. Things like this happen all the time. But his feet refused to move. Something deep inside urged him to check. What if it's someone important? He stepped closer, his heart pounding as if warning him of the gravity of the moment. Bending down, he saw movement. His breathing quickened. Carefully, he unwrapped one of the bundles. Inside, a tiny infant, trembling. Its eyes closed, tiny hands curled into fists. Its lips were tinged blue, but it was alive. The man turned his gaze to the second bundle. Another baby, just as small, just as helpless. Oh my God! He breathed, fear tightening around his chest. He gently lifted both babies, pressing them against his body to warm them. His fingers trembled, his heart pounded wildly. What now? The thought shot through his mind. What do I do? How can I help? The cold seeped through even his thick coat, but the infants, held close to him, slowly began to breathe more steadily. Something shifted inside him. The snow kept falling, covering the empty streets as if trying to hide what had happened. The man stood still, looking toward the darkness where the woman had disappeared. He wanted to call out, to ask why, to demand an explanation. But she was gone. This moment became the beginning of a new story, one neither of them could have foreseen. The next morning brought both hope and uncertainty. The man, who had rescued the infants from certain death, had been unable to sleep all night. Sitting in his tiny apartment, he watched over the babies as they slept peacefully. Memories of his own childhood, filled with hardship, haunted him. He feared that these children might face the same fate. By morning, he took them to the nearest hospital, marking the start of a new chapter in their lives. A family, upon seeing the news about the abandoned infants, couldn't remain indifferent. It was a middle-aged couple, Carlos and Sofia. Carlos had built a successful career in real estate, while Sofia dedicated herself to charity work. Their home was vast and luxurious, like something from a magazine. The walls were adorned with paintings, and rare material chandeliers cast warm light across elegant rooms. And yet, despite all their wealth, there had always been something missing. They cast a soft glow as they welcomed one of the infants into their home, confident that they could give him everything his little heart desired. They called him a gift from heaven, and surrounded him with love from the very first days. The second child, however, was sent to a local orphanage by social services. The orphanage was housed in an old building with a leaking roof and cold walls. The air smelled of dampness, and even the toys looked worn out by time. Here, children were used to long queues, a lack of toys, and minimal attention from caregivers. For the new baby, this marked the beginning of a difficult but significant life. He was baptized in the cries of other children and the rare kindness of volunteers. Time passed. The wealthy boy, named Manuel, grew up surrounded by luxury. His nursery was filled with plush toys, expensive books, and building sets that he could replace as often as he wished. Sophia hired the best tutors to teach him music, art, and languages. He never heard the word no, and was convinced that every whim of his should be fulfilled. Carlos saw Manuel as his legacy and often said, "Our boy deserves the very best." Meanwhile, the boy left at the orphanage was named Alejandro. His toys were old cars with missing wheels. But despite the hardships, Alejandro grew into a kind and compassionate child. His dreams were always big. He wanted to become an engineer so he could build houses that wouldn't leak, unlike their orphanage. In the evenings, he would gaze at the stars and think, "Somewhere out there is another world, and I must see it." The contrast between their lives became more pronounced. Manuel's days were filled with tennis lessons, piano recitals, and family yacht trips. Alejandro, on the other hand, found joy in simple things. A friend's smile, a ray of sunlight filtering through a dirty window. Each followed his own path, unaware of the other's existence. Sophia and Carlos took pride in Manuel's achievements. "Look how talented he is," Sophia would say, watching him play the piano. But deep inside, she worried that he was becoming too spoiled. Carlos, however, laughed it off. "Dear, he'll grow out of it. Confidence is a good thing." Manuel, for his part, believed that his success was solely due to his own efforts and rarely expressed gratitude to his parents. Meanwhile, at the orphanage, the caregivers noticed that Alejandro set an example for the other children. He taught younger kids how to tie their shoelaces, shared the rare sweets given by volunteers, and even invented simple games to cheer others up. "He's such a kind boy," one of the caregivers often said. He never met his parents but learned to live with that emptiness. These two worlds developed in parallel, like two shores of the same river, connected by an invisible thread. Life continued, preparing new trials for both. The city was vast and impersonal, a metropolis of contrasts. Luxurious restaurants stood beside abandoned factories, and towering skyscrapers loomed over the bustling streets filled with people too busy to notice one another. And somewhere in this chaos, years later, Manuel and Alejandro found themselves in the same city, unaware of each other's existence. Manuel, now a successful entrepreneur and owner of a chain of restaurants, prided himself on his independence and achievements. His days were meticulously planned, meetings with suppliers, tastings of new dishes, and staff supervision. One of his restaurants served exquisite cuisine, popular among the city's elite. His name was well known in business circles, and he was accustomed to attention and respect. But beneath all the success lay a deep emptiness, one he rarely acknowledged. "Business is life," he told himself. Alejandro, on the other hand, worked as a warehouse loader. His days were filled with backbreaking labor, carrying boxes, sorting shipments, Yet, despite his exhaustion, he found joy in the little things. His co-workers appreciated his kindness and his ability to lighten the mood with a joke. In the evenings, he read books he bought at thrift stores, dreaming of one day escaping the cycle of hardship. Sometimes he wondered about his past. Could I have a family somewhere? And then one day their paths crossed. It was an ordinary day. Alejandro had gone to the supermarket for groceries. He walked between the aisles, carefully calculating his purchases to stay within budget. That's when he noticed a man in an expensive suit struggling to pick up a torn grocery bag. Apples, a bottle of wine, and some greens had spilled onto the floor. Without hesitation, Alejandro stepped forward. "Let me help," he said, quickly gathering the fallen items. The man looked up. His sharp features, slightly furrowed brows, and light eyes seemed oddly familiar to Alejandro, though he couldn't pinpoint why. "Thank you," the man replied. "That would have been difficult with just one hand." Manuel gave a slight smile. For a brief moment, something about Alejandro struck him. Something familiar, as if he were looking at a faint reflection of himself. They exchanged glances, and both felt an inexplicable emotion wash over them. Their eyes were the same shade of light hazel. Their features were similar, the shape of their faces, their expressions. But neither of them gave it much thought, dismissing it as mere coincidence. "Thanks again. This would have been a real mess without you," Manuel said with a grateful nod. Alejandro laughed. "Always happy to help. Funny, though, we kind of look alike." He meant it as a joke, but Manuel felt a strange tension in those words. "Yeah, I guess that happens," he replied, trying to shake off the growing unease. The feeling of déjà vu lingered. After their encounter, Alejandro couldn't shake the image of that man from his mind. Memories from childhood resurfaced, the orphanage, the caregivers, the other children. Why did he seem so familiar? He wondered, sitting in his small room that evening. These thoughts wouldn't leave him alone, but he dismissed them as exhaustion and the insignificance of the event. Meanwhile, back in his office, Manuel also found it difficult to focus. The stranger's words about their resemblance echoed in his mind. He rarely thought about his past. His attention had always been on the future, on success. But now, something inside him had clicked, as if a door had opened, revealing old and forgotten emotions. The city moved on, indifferent to the lives it carried, but fate seemed unwilling to leave them alone with their thoughts. This was only the first of many threads that would weave their destinies together. Soon, revelations awaited them, ones that would change their lives forever. Manuel couldn't stop thinking about the meeting with the stranger. The more he dwelled on it, the more he felt that it wasn't just a coincidence. That evening, during dinner with his family, he decided to share his thoughts. "I met a man today. He looked just like me," he said cautiously. For a moment, silence fell over the table. The quiet clinking of silverware, which had just been background noise, now seemed deafening against the sudden tension. Manuel's father slowly set down his fork, pressing his fingers together before clearing his throat. His mother averted her gaze, her hand hesitantly brushing the edge of the tablecloth. "Manuel, there's something you need to know," his father finally said. His voice was quiet but firm, the voice of a man who had postponed an important conversation for far too long. "We've wanted to tell you for a long time, but we didn't know how," he continued, avoiding his son's eyes. "You were adopted." The words struck like lightning. Manuel froze. His palms grew clammy, and an icy numbness spread through his chest. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His mother, unable to bear the silence, added softly, "We thought we were protecting you. We wanted you to grow up with love and security, without the shadow of the past." Her eyes filled with tears, but she dared not meet his gaze. "You were found as an infant," his father continued, "and you weren't alone. You have a twin brother." Manuel slowly raised his head, staring at his father, trying to distinguish truth from the storm of emotions consuming him. "But we couldn't adopt both of you," his father admitted. "At the time, we didn't have the means or the opportunity to challenge the system. We did everything we could to give you the life you deserved." Every word felt like a blade cutting into Manuel's soul. "Why did you keep this from me? Why didn't I know?" His voice trembled with emotion. Anger, betrayal, confusion. His mother reached out, attempting to touch his hand, but he pulled away as if afraid that even her touch would shatter the last fragments of the reality he had known. "We didn't know much ourselves," his father explained. "The only thing we have is the name of the orphanage where we found you. They might have more answers." Manuel tried to process it all, but his thoughts swirled in chaos. Memories from childhood resurfaced, passing remarks from neighbors, fleeting comments about how he didn't look like his parents. Now everything made sense. He leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath, trying to steady himself. But inside, a storm raged. "I need to find out the truth," he whispered, more to himself than to them. His determination grew stronger by the second. He knew he wouldn't be able to rest until he uncovered everything. The name of the orphanage became his first step toward unraveling the mystery of his past. Manuel arrived at the orphanage his parents had mentioned. His heart pounded with a mix of anticipation and fear. Outside, a light drizzle fell, adding to the gray uncertainty of the moment. As he stepped inside, he was met with the warm scent of old paper and dust. The small office was surrounded by children's drawings and faded photographs on the walls, an atmosphere filled with memories and untold stories. He watched as the orphanage staff carefully flipped through old records. Every minute of waiting felt like an eternity. Something was about to happen, something that would change his life. Finally, one of the staff members looked up and gave a small smile. "We found your file." The documents were yellowed, the ink slightly faded. Manuel's eyes scanned the papers quickly until he found it, the name of the other boy, and next to it a set of contact details. Alejandro had left them after aging out of the system. His hands trembled as he dialed the number. When Alejandro answered, his voice was cautious but kind. "We need to meet," Manuel said, trying to sound confident, though inside, he felt completely exposed. A silence hung between them. Then finally, "All right." They met in a city park. The sound of children's laughter and the scent of freshly cut grass created an illusion of serenity. But inside, both men were a storm of emotions. Manuel studied Alejandro for a long time, as if searching for pieces of himself within him. Finally, he exhaled and said quietly, "You're my brother." His voice was low but unwavering. He handed Alejandro the copies of the orphanage records. Alejandro took the papers, his hands trembling slightly. "Is this some kind of joke?" he asked, disbelief evident in his tone. But as he looked between the documents and Manuel's face, the same face reflected back at him, he realized the truth was undeniable. The brothers stood in silence, the weight of the moment sinking deep into their minds. Manuel remained still, his thoughts racing. Who was she? Why did her life end this way? Could I have changed anything if I had known sooner? Alejandro closed his eyes, trying to picture the face of the mother he had never seen. He wanted to piece together the fragments of her story, to feel her presence, if only for a moment. She did everything she could, Alejandro finally said, his voice trembling, yet filled with certainty. If she saved us, she had her reasons. It was her choice, no matter how difficult it was. Manuel remained silent, feeling the anger and pain he had carried for so long begin to fade. They were replaced by a deep sense of sorrow and gratitude. "Her choice was not an easy one," he said softly, lowering his gaze to the ground. "She deserves our forgiveness. Maybe even more than that." Alejandro nodded. His expression was serious, but there was a newfound gentleness in his eyes. "Now we know the truth. She tried to save us, even if it cost her life. We are her children, and that alone means everything." Silently, the brothers stood by the grave for a few more moments. Alejandro took out a small bouquet of wildflowers they had brought and placed it gently on the grave. "Thank you." The words seemed to dissolve into the crisp autumn air, yet for the brothers, it carried immense meaning. Before leaving, Manuel turned back one last time. He felt that this moment had become a turning point in his life. For the first time, he accepted that not everything in life could be controlled, that some things simply had to be let go. Alejandro, in turn, felt a long-awaited sense of closure. He no longer needed to search for a family. He had found it in his brother and in the story of their mother. As they walked away from the cemetery, they remained silent. But within them, there was a newfound sense of peace and determination. The future was uncertain, full of unknowns, but now they were ready to face it together, knowing that their story was not just one of pain. It was a testament to the power of love and sacrifice. Thank you for watching. What do you think of this story? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your opinion means a lot to us,